Good morning and happy Monday. It is May 6th. We are here for council meeting, the first of our week-long review of the FY25 operating budgets and the FY25 to 30 capital improvements program. Before we begin the discussions, Madam Clerk, are there any announcements?
No, thank you, Mr. President. There are no announcements.
Terrific. Okay, we're going to get right into our first agenda item. That is an overview of revenues and expenditures. We have Mr. Howard here to share that with us, so I will turn it over to him.
Good morning, everyone. And each year, when the council finishes committee sessions, we always do a overview of kind of where things stand at the moment before the council begins its full week of review of all the different items that you have before it. So as of today, the committees have completed work on the FY25 operating budget. And per the council president's budget guidance, this year we have a new and enhanced programs list. The committees have placed a total of $130.7 million on the new enhanced programs list. This includes $99.7 million of ongoing expenditure items and $31 million in one-time expenditure items. Items on the new enhanced programs list that were included in the executive's recommended budget total is $69.9 million. And items on the new enhanced programs list that were not included as part of the executive's recommended budget total $60.8 million. We have attached, as part of the staff report, details on all the changes and recommendations made by the committees to date. Those are on pages 1 through 13. I do also want to note that the committees so far have made $3.9 million in reductions to the executive's budget. Over the course of the next week, the full council will review all these various committee recommendations for all the different budget items. And as often happens, these items will change a little bit in terms of both potential increases or decreases to where things stand today. The council will also, during this week, be taking up items related to FY24 expenditure items, and those may impact the total resources available to the council in FY25 as you make your final budget decisions. And of course, a straw vote on all the council's adjustments to the FY25 budget will take place on May 16th, and final action on all the resolutions is scheduled for May 23rd. And happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Let me open it up to colleagues to see if there are any questions, or Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Howard. We are in the home stretch, and you are counting all the dollars, and very much appreciate this update. Wanted to ask a question regarding the new and enhanced programs list, and this is for my edification, but I know that a number of us have been asking in committee, so quite possibly the council president could weigh in as well. Of the $130.7 million that are added to the new and enhanced list, how many of what is the breakdown there of items that essentially have to be funded, right? And we'll get to this in a little bit, but when in the T&E committee, as an example, there are fuel costs that have increased, and we have to pay our fuel costs. So while it is a new and enhanced program, or enhanced program, I should say, it is, to borrow a line from my committee's colleague, Councilmember Balcom, and has an asterisk behind it. And so have you done the analysis there, or has that determination been made?
Sure. So what we've done is we've tried to weed out as much of those as possible. I'm sure there are probably a few examples that as they'll come up in committee where there could be some discussion or debate whether something is an enhancement or is required to be funded, and that's a very appropriate discussion for you all to have. Staff did go through at the beginning of the budget process and create this, break out all the different items that were required to be funded either by law or policy or some other contractual obligation, with the idea that those did not need to go on the new and enhanced list. Since that point, that was our initial breakdown, and since that point, there's obviously been some discussion at committee on items that are, a little that require discussion. We'll put it that way, and that can be viewed in a different way. And so I think we've got most of those off the list to begin with, but there are certainly some that that you'll need to discuss as a council and make some decisions on.
Okay, I appreciate that. It's, shedding some light for people who are looking at the packet and the incredible Excel spreadsheets that are here, right? Trying to make sense of it for everybody. So, but I appreciate that explanation. Thank you, Mr. Howard.
Thank you. Yeah, the goal here, when we get through this week, and we'll be going through each of the committee recommendations, is to decipher any of the items that are legal requirements, that are contractual obligations, weed them out of the new and enhanced program list, because that was the intention, and we want to make sure that that's consistent. Part of the reason why we bring committee recommendations to full council, and so we can ensure that we're doing that. And so that would be an item to raise during discussion in addition to priorities and other dynamics. And so I just want to make sure that that we understand that, and then also to clarify and make sure that there is agreement of ongoing versus one-time expenses. I know there was quite a bit of work, and there have been some conversations after the fact to get clarification. Sometimes the information that was sent over with the budget from the executive branch was unclear, and clarified and characterized things that sounded like they were ongoing, but when committees did their deeper dive or when information was presented, it was easier to decipher that these were actually intended to be one time, or vice versa, where they were framed as one time, but they actually do appear to be ongoing. So those are specifically the topics that we should make sure we're comfortable with and can determine as a body here, in addition to priorities that individuals raise that may not have come up through the committee discussion. So thank you for raising that. Any other comments, questions? I just want to say here, we'll have more time to say, but thank you, Mr. Howard, in particular, for keeping all of this straight and all the work that you have been doing to facilitate the budget process. And thank you to the whole staff, because this is, to say the least, an all-hands-on-deck effort. And so really appreciate it. We have a very busy week ahead of us. This is just the beginning of right now, and then we got to make it all work next week. So it's going to be a sprint and a marathon, as I was discussing on the way in, and so really appreciate all the staff support to help us to get there. So with that, I think we have our overview of revenue of expenditures. I don't see any other colleagues wishing to speak. So we are going to move on to the next item on our agenda, the work session on the FY25 operating budget and FY25 to 30 CIP for Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. I'll call up Ms. Dunn and the Planning Board Chair and the Directors of Parks and Directors of Planning. And we'll welcome you up here. I will just say that Planning Department is busy updating master plans, reviewing regulatory applications, conducting critical research to address topics of great interest to the community and to all of us, such as segregation mapping work, so we can understand our land use history. At Parks, we got a bit of an update during committee. They continue their core work of caring for and maintaining the 419 parks across almost 38,000 acres of parkland, over 270 miles of paved and natural surface trails, and 4 lakes, actually, which don't get a lot of discussion when we talk about everything that's happening, not to mention the historic structures and all of the other assets that they oversee. The services they provide are some of the most visible, most utilized county services and amenities to our residents. We talked quite a bit and had a significant and robust committee conversation of how we can work towards restoring and addressing some of the underfunding that has chronically been a challenge with the executive recommended budgets over the last several years, so that we can support our young people and our older people and everybody in between. We understand the major return on investment that we get from parks and how much our residents have come to rely on them, and understand the maintenance of our parks and how important that is. And I just wanted to note on the planning side, as we talk about new and enhanced programming, one of the challenges on planning, and I just think it's important for the purposes of this discussion, is that each master plan is viewed as its own work program. And so many of those master plans, nearly all of those master plans, require consultants or other expertise. That is part of the core functioning of the office. but because of the way that it's an outside agency and because of the way that the funding works, we're treating what are really core functions as new programs each year. And this is not just true of this budget. This has been true of every budget. Last year, for instance, not funding some of the consultants stopped some of the progress on some of these aspects of our work program, which is the work program that we provide to the planning department. So it's just something that we should keep in mind. I do think we might want to think through how we present that as we move forward to have a master plan implementation consulting budget, for instance, as opposed to a great Seneca consulting line item. It's something that I think we ought to think about and consider, but as we take up these budget requests and think through them, not funding some of these items in the planning non-recommended cuts that we are looking to restore would mean that we are not allowing them to move forward with the work program that we have asked of them, requested of them, essentially demanded of them. So I just think it's important for us to realize and the funding levels of both the planning department and the parks department are not proportionate to the funding levels and increases of other county departments. So with that, let me welcome Chair Harris, Director Sartori, Director Figueredo. I can turn to you to make any initial comments, and then we can turn to Ms. Dunn to walk us through the packet and the committee's recommendations.
Good morning, Artie Harris, Planning Board Chair. Thank you for having us here today. We are in support of the PHP Committee's recommended adjustments to the 2025 budget, and we're here to answer any questions you have. We really appreciate how you are supportive of us, and we're happy to be here today.
Good morning. For the record, Jason Sartori, Montgomery County Planning Director. First, I want to begin by welcoming Executive Director West. I look forward to many fruitful conversations and working collaboratively with you and the rest of the council. Also want to thank Ms. Dunn and the PHP committee. I think they did a comprehensive review of and gave thoughtful consideration to each of our budget requests. I think we are quite the efficient department. I think there are a number of things that Council President Friedson said that he kind of stole the words right out of my mouth, and so I appreciate those words and that sentiment. We work on many of these items hand in hand with each of the 11 of you, with most of the council committees, and of course with the full council. And I think we bring great value to the communities across the county, and we are a consistent and reliable resource to the council. Yet our budget represents less than 0.4% of the county executive's recommended operating budget. Our department's original request for FY25 was an 8.5% increase. But with savings and alternative sources of funding that we've been able to identify, we were able to reduce our request by $315,000. And then at committee, PHP removed an additional $325,000 from our request, but also added two very important items to Tier 2 of the new and enhanced programs list that were not part of our original request, and that is the Planning Academy and an Equity Chief. And we could talk more about that as we get into the work session here. If you fund everything in our Tier 1 and Tier 2, our budget increase would be 7.6%. And our one-time project funding, which is the core of our work program and which hit a low this current year, fiscal year, of $90,000, it would be consistent with our pre-pandemic levels. And so we think it's vitally important to receive that level of funding in order to be able to move forward with the concepts that are in our newly adopted general plan. Not that it just sits on a shelf, but it's something that we're actively implementing. And so I appreciate your thoughtful consideration of our requests.
Appreciate that. Ms. Figueredo?
Good morning, Council President Friedson and members of the County Council. Yes, thank you, and thank you for your summary of what the Parks Department does with the resources that you give us. When we initially got the County Executive's recommendation, which required us to find $4.2 million in reductions, that was a real challenge for us because we had initially only asked for about $1.5 million in additional new program enhancements. So we do really we're very grateful for the committee's recommendation to, at a minimum, restore us to a same services budget by adding about under $1 million back to our budget, and that leaves about another $1 million that the committee recommended adding to the new and enhanced programs list for consideration during this reconciliation process. Our operating budget funds the staff, materials, contracts, everything that's necessary to run this 37,000-acre Parks Department with 1,000 employees. And our parks facilities and programs serve children, teens, seniors, immigrants, the children of immigrants, people who play every sport under the sun, and they all come together in our parks. People of every race, religion, and background come together in our parks. Parks bring people together, and I think that you all, some of you I saw at Saturday's Sligo Fest, could see all of these things in one day, all happening at once. And, you know, we do all of this with really a budget that is about 2% of the county's overall operating budget. And what we would like to get back, if it were possible, is really just about $1 million of funding. But what that $1 million would allow us to do is better serve our residents, and this includes adding to our activation and parks events, things like Sligo Fest, improving our customer service, reducing our dependence on herbicides, improving our data collection and GIS mapping. These are just a few of the examples of things that we could do with really what amounts to a small amount of money. And I know it's a challenge to find resources for all of these things, but I think that you can see that the programs and events and the maintenance of our parks, all of this is in fulfillment of the Parks Department's priorities, which are aligned with and in fact informed by the council's priorities, what we believe are the council's priorities. So once again, grateful for the committee's recommendation, and happy to answer any questions that you all may have about our request.
Appreciate that. Okay, let's go through the parks and planning budgets. Let's get through that, and then we can move on to administrative fund and central administrative services. Ms. Dunn.
Good morning. Thank you. As you know, you received a staff report that contains all the information related to these budget requests and the committee's recommendations related to these requests. You also received an addendum. There were 3 minor things that needed either an omission or a correction done. So there's an addendum to this packet. And as we go through it, where those things pop up and need addressed, I'll chime in and let you know. So with that, the work session packet or staff report starts with a summary, but since we're going to talk about everything in detail, we don't really need to do that, and I just would rather dive right in. On the 3rd page of the staff report is a broad overview of the MNC PPC budget, which I do think is useful to talk about it as a whole. The FY25 proposed tax-supported operating budget for the Commission, including debt service, is $188.1 million. And this requested budget represents an increase of about $17 million, or 10.2%, over the adopted FY24 tax-supported budget. And as you've heard this morning, the county executive has recommended a smaller increase for FY25. For the administration fund, the executive's recommended budget is 2.7 below the commission's request. For the park fund, his recommended budget is $4 million below the commission's request. Non-tax supported operating budget items for this year total $22.5 million, and that is up about 6.9% over FY24. And as most people on this council know, it is typically the case for MNC PPC that there are reductions between what they have requested and the CE's budget. We evaluate those as we go through, and we evaluate those with the committee. And this year we also will be concentrating on the council president's approach to the budget. So it's sort of a combination of two. We look at what's been reduced, but also have to consider what are the items that the council president has noted are things that we need to either put on a new and enhanced list or a reconciliation or high priority list in other years. On page 4 of the staff report, you'll see a very high level but comprehensive list of how the commission has been funded in FY24. You'll see the adopted budget here for the commission, and in FY25 you see their request. You have it broken out by the administration fund. I'll just note for people that aren't familiar with that, that contains the commissioner's office, the planning department, the central administrative service, and some non-departmental money. The park fund are really parks operations, again, some non-departmental money and debt service. And then as you'll see also on that page, there are grants. There are things we call self-supporting funds. There's the Advanced Land Acquisition Fund. There are internal service funds, they're listed there, and special revenue funds. And then you'll see the totals. Turning to page 5, we always like to mention how this translates into the spending affordability guidelines that this council adopts. For the upcoming budget year, the council approved an FY25 spending affordability guideline for MNC PPC of $175.6 million. This is up from $160.1 million in the approved FY25 aggregate operating budget. The commission's request is about $176.6 million for the spending affordability guidelines or aggregate operating budget purposes, because not everything's included in that type of budget. This is about $1 million more than the SAG target. However, the committee's recommended budget falls below the council's approved SAG limit for MNC PPC. And you see it broken down there on page 5 of the staff report. Major changes in the commission's budget for FY25. Personnel cost changes in FY25 for MNC PPC's proposed budget total about $10.5 million. Non-personnel cost changes about $3.4 million. And funding for new initiatives across both the Parks Planning Department and CAS, about $3.5 million. If you turn to page 6 of the staff report, you'll see that, again, these are all the major changes to the commission's budget broken out by personnel costs, non-personnel costs, and then critical needs and enhancements, which break it out by department or office. But as you guys will be making decisions based on the Park Fund and Administration Fund, we're going to then dive into each of those individually. And if you turn to the next page on the staff report, we have the Park Fund. The Park Fund, Montgomery Parks has requested an FY25's tax-supported funding of $134.9 million. This excludes grants, debt service, and reserves, and represents an $11.5 million or 9.3% increase over FY24 of approved budget. And on the staff report, you can see that broken down. But before reviewing the committee's recommended adjustments to this fund, we'll look at what are the changes from FY24 to 25 in particular for the Park Fund. And those are on the bottom of page 7 of the staff report. And it shows these things broken out by compensation, known commitments for operating, the water quality, National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, and other items. And just to note, so known operating commitments for these changes from FY24 to 25. I'm sorry, let me back up a second. We'll do compensation first. The compensation adjustments, the change from 24 to 25, accounts for about 52% of the increase in the Park Fund, with the compensation marker accounting for 58.3% of the compensation adjustments increase. Known operating commitments account for about 19.8% of the requested increase for 25. Operating budget impacts are only 2.7%. The National Pollution Discharge Elimination System is a mandate. It accounts for 1.2%. Debt service on obligation bonds, 6.2%, and other program enhancements are 12.7%. Just to note before we get into the adjustments by the committee, staffing in total, there were 17 new positions included in the FY25 proposed budget, but 5 of these positions have effectively a net zero impact on the budget, and 2 of these 17 positions are needed to fulfill operating budget impacts. With related to salary lapse, at the request of the council in FY24, the Parks Department increased its budgetary lapse from 9% to 10%. And during that review last year, the department provided a detailed description of their efforts at hiring and have shown admirable progress in filling these vacant positions. And according to recent reports, these efforts continue to show impressive results. So there's no recommendation on salary lapse. And in addition to that, there's no increase in fees that the Parks Department is proposing for FY25. So with that, we're now going to turn to the committee's recommended adjustments to the FY25 Park Fund request. And as the director noted, to meet the executive recommended funding level, the department's allocated reduction for the park fund is just over $4 million, about $4.2 million. Just to note for people that may not be aware, when the county executive's budget comes out and it is below a certain amount for both the parks fund and the administration fund, the commission goes back and kind of looks at what the relative impact to each of those either offices or departments is, and do their own resharing of that allocation. And so sometimes you'll see two different numbers, but it's from the Parks Department, their allocated reduction based on the CE's recommendation is a little over $4.2 million. The committee has made a recommendation. It was a unanimous recommendation out of the committee, and they are the following. They have requested to retain about $908,000 in funding to cover items that are on the first table on page 9 of the staff report. These expenses were offered as non-recommended reductions to meet the CE budget. However, the committee deems these items as necessary to maintain current park service levels. I don't know if we want to pause to go over any of these items or go through the whole section on park fund.
Why don't we go through the full section, and then we can entertain questions and
Okay.
comments as needed.
Okay, so as I was saying, those amounts on the first table on page 9 represent items that the committee deemed important to continue park service levels at current levels. Then they placed the remaining items into two tiers, and these occur on the bottom of page 9 at the top of page 10, and these were all placed on the new and enhanced program list in those two tiers to indicate relative importance for restoration. And with that, I would stop because I think those are the issues before the council.
Okay, so there was a robust discussion in committee. I think we got to a really good place. We tried to decipher what were, basic core functions, and what were, additional enhancements, and separate those out. And then we did tier the new and enhanced programs. The interest was to put them on as a full, tier 1 as a block, and then the other ones as itemized. So I just want to make sure that that's noted. That was what the discussion was. So the tier 1 is a block, and the other items are a la carte, so to speak. But individual items that the interest was to be able to choose individually on those. I will note we eliminated a number of the requests that were on here and tried to only put forward the ones that we thought were the most important, the most central to our overarching policy objectives, and with some level of deference to the Parks Department to let us know what they believe is the most important for their provision of services. So with that, let me see if there are any colleagues who have any comments or questions on these items. I don't see any. Councilmember Glass?
There we go. We'll kick us off. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to our commission leaders. Want to give a shout out to Parks for having the first ever Sligo Creek Fest, which was rainy and fun. And the community did come out along with a number of us, so it was fun seeing everybody on Sligo Creek. So kudos to you and your team, Director Figueredo. The question I have regarding the budget is in Tier 1. And it is the data analyst to work with all divisions to translate data into actionable information. It sounds great. Love data. Want to translate data into action. But can someone shed some light as to what that actually means? Because I would assume that there are already people looking at programs and looking at visitor data to understand what's going on. I don't know. Is this a Parks program or a request?
Yeah, this is a Parks request. Over the last few years, we've grown our data team, and we have, I think, come a long way in our ability to gather and use data, but we think with an additional position here, we're going to be able to, I have to say that when my staff explained to me our data analysis, it is really complex, and I think it speaks to the level of sophistication that we're trying to bring to this now. But in order to expand our use of data, for example, collecting user numbers, which is actually very challenging, and also be able to bring together all the different groups of data and be able to more easily pull from them, bring them together, make them usable, pull from them the information that we need, so when the planning board or the council asks us for more specific information about our parks programs, our maintenance, where we're spending money, where we most need resources, we'll be able to more readily do that. It just makes us more efficient.
Got it. So there already is a team?
There is a small and mighty team that we have working on data analysis now. So this would be in that second tier, one additional position.
Makes sense. So next time you come before the council and we ask you user info, this is the team that helps generate that.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Vice President Stewart.
I just also want to add my thanks for Sligo Fest this weekend. It was really a terrific, even in the rain. And I'm going to confess, I had no idea we had eels in Sligo Creek. That was remarkable, and I think the level of engagement and education and really bringing people out, even in the rain, it was fantastic. So thank you so much for that. And I just want to thank the PHP committee for their work on this and how well you went through these budgets. I really appreciate that. And Ms. Dunn, thank you for all your work. And I want to say that, when people reach out to our office, we hear a lot about the maintenance, because that's what people notice, and I know you hear that too, as well as the programming and who you're reaching. And I think you all are doing a wonderful job, but as I look at how we can put as much of Tier 1, as I understand, as a block, and getting that in, and then looking at the Tier 2 items, that's the framework I'm going to be thinking about. Thinking about how all the things that you do to make sure that you can continue to do those. And so today I don't have any other questions. I think the packet is excellent. The conversation PHP had was very in-depth, but I just wanted to express my thanks and let you know how I'm thinking about the budget.
Thank you. And if you like, we can take you electrofishing one day and you can catch some eels.
Thank you. I was also at Sligo Creek Fest. I probably should have mentioned that. It was terrific, and despite not the most beautiful of weather, I will say the most exciting part was how many of the neighbors were walking to the event. And so it drew a regional crowd, of which I was one, but it also really drew quite a bit of a local crowd, which I know was part of the interest and the goal. And you could really see young kids and strollers and families coming in. I think soccer practice and Little League was canceled because of fear of rain, and so while the weather wasn't great on the one hand, I think it actually added to providing a great family option on the other. I did want to note, and I should have noted this in the beginning, the assistant barn manager was a joint committee recommendation, so it's actually included in here. We did the joint committee right before we had the committee session. That's related to maintenance for the park police, horse care and maintenance. I just want to note that that was a joint committee recommendation. So I see my co-chair and wanted to make sure I noted that for colleagues to make sure.
If I could just add, I'd like to see the video of them catching the eels.
It's really cool.
All right, we're going to let the record reflect that the chair of public safety would like to see the video of them catching the eels. So now the record will reflect that. Councilmember Sales.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, everyone, for the wonderful packet. It's going to be difficult to look at Tier 2 items individually, and I'm not sure how if we're going to deliberate that here, or we're just Are we doing that here, or are we doing that?
Well, so the main question before us today is whether or not there is an interest on them being included in the new and enhanced program list. Ultimately, we're going to have to decide what is funded on the new and enhanced program list. We're not going to make final decisions on that today. That will be part of reconciliation. It also is an opportunity, as was being discussed in the prior conversation, to make sure that they're accurately reflected, that it's ongoing versus one time, that there's a full understanding of that as well. So if there is an interest in not including them on the on the new and enhanced program list for further consideration, those motions can be made now. The other options would be, committees have made recommendations to tranche or not tranche certain items in certain ways. If there was the will of the body to not take it up in that way as part of reconciliation, now would be the opportunity to raise that. For instance, if somebody wanted to tranche all of Tier 2 together, we intentionally did not do that. We deliberated and discussed it, but this was the compromise that we came to. We thought that this was the best way to break it down, but now would be the opportunity to do that.
Well, I'm looking at the GIS specialists, the bilingual, the programming for our seniors. I think those are high priority. I think anything that's going to help with integrating technology with the use of our parks and making it more innovative and interactive. Everyone has a phone. I think it would be helpful. So I think anything data related should be tranched separately. And I'm looking at items 1, 6, I think the Tier 2, number 8, these are all Tier 2 items. So I don't know if there's a particular way we could tranche, or if we're just doing it by the dollar amount. And then, but I think looking at Tier 2, I think we can all agree the items on Tier 1 are all important to ongoing maintenance, and the data analysis, especially since you're using the data to decide where to put programs and different services and different improvements across the park. Just looking at Tier 2, definitely anything that's going to help our diverse community engage with the park, I think that's a no-brainer. I don't know how we're going to pick through this, because we all want herbicide-free weed control. So I'm trying to see what can be eliminated. The PROS plan implementation research, can you remind us of that program?
That is a one-time request. It's not a position. It's a request for funding, which we did reduce, to help us contract out some research that will better guide our implementation of the PROS plan.
So this is one time, not ongoing?
Yes, it's not a position. Okay. We may continue the program, but for all intents and purposes for this year, this is just a one-time request.
Wait a minute. I think there's some discussion.
Right. It's not a position.
Okay.
I mean, we'd like to keep it going. It would be part of our budget. Yes.
Okay. So is this the only thing that's one time on this Tier 2 chart?
Just to clarify.
Yes.
Our view of one-time versus ongoing, positions are certainly ongoing, but there are things that aren't positions that would be classified as ongoing, and it seems to me, just to clarify, that this would be included in that.
Correct.
Because the interest would be,
correct,
you would come back and
it would
request
be in our
this
base
money
budget.
again.
Yes.
If
correct.
this were, for instance, just to make sure we all are in agreement and understand and on the same page, if you were hiring a consultant for a one-time project and the interest was to never hire that consultant in the foreseeable future again, because the scope of service has a beginning and an end, that's a one-time, that would be intended as a one-time expense. But if you're thinking about this as you're requesting $50,000 now, you might be requesting 50 or 25 or 100,000 next year, depending on how the research goes, then from our purposes, we should be viewing it as an ongoing expense.
Yes, obviously, there's more flexibility when it's not a position, when you're not adding a position, but
True.
we have every reason to believe we probably want to continue with some of these contracts and services for research.
Appreciate that. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. So the herbicide-free weed control initiative, that's one time, we're just going to try it out and never do it again, or is it a pilot?
So we have been trying to reduce our dependence on chemical pesticides, and that is more resource intensive. There's different materials, there's more staff time. So this is a request to enhance that this year.
Is it product enhancement or the application?
It's equipment.
Okay, okay. All right. And then one last question. I believe it's page 17. Are there any specific RESJ projects in parks and planning that you envision or that have the most significant potential?
Could I just suggest that we hold off on planning, because there's quite a lot that we are working on planning that will be a significant topic of conversation. So if it's okay with you, I think if we could hold off on the planning side of it and just focus on the parks, get done with the parks, and then we'll take up the planning.
Well, I thought this was about the investments that they're doing in the parks based on the data that they're collecting.
Yeah, it is. So if we could just focus on the parks side of it, but hold off on the planning department side of it, because there are quite a bit that will be significant topics of discussion on the planning side. And I think it would be helpful.
I will yield my question.
No,
Are you answering the?
I think ask her to answer the question on parks. I'm just suggesting that holding off on the planning.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, so a number of our requests are part of our efforts to implement the Parks Department's equity agenda. So, for example, the outreach specialist that we've requested, the bilingual outreach specialist, the graphics position, our programming, our PROS implementation request, all of those things are geared towards doing better outreach, having more programs that serve the needs of all residents across the county. A number of these requests are in fact tied to equity.
Thank you, Mitty.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Councilmember Albernas.
Thank you. Great presentation. Didn't make it out on Saturday, but by all accounts, it was a great event. I didn't know about the eels. You learn something new every 5 minutes in this job, sometimes every 5 seconds. It's one of my favorite things about this job. I want to follow up on Councilmember Sales' questions regarding the herbicide-free weed control initiative. The issue of invasives is a dramatic one. We've heard testimony year after year from the weed warriors and park staff itself. We know this is a significant issue, and actually when we did our walking tour for the Tacoma Park Master Plan, we saw for ourselves some of the trees that were being inundated and the challenge that that's presenting to the staff. Is this in any way connected to that effort or to expand? Because I know you're also dealing with progressive policies that were established in our community a number of years ago to do our best to eliminate or use where we can organic products, but this continues to be a big issue.
So a few years ago, we piloted these foam stream units that use a hot foam that has no chemicals in it to kill weeds. We primarily use those as part of our maintenance functions. Weeds coming through cracks in pavement, for example, in courts and other areas like that do permanent damage to our infrastructure. And so where we might have used pesticides, it's very hard to hand pull all of those, especially if you've ever tried to weed your driveway. It's very hard to do. So the foam stream units allowed us to eliminate weeds under those conditions without using pesticides, and it was successful. So we've requested to expand that program by adding a couple of additional units. You're correct, non-native invasives are a big problem in parks. We simply don't have enough resources to manage them. It's a lot of parkland. What we are trying to do, and I think we did get a position last year to help with this, is focus our our efforts more in our best natural areas, so that at least there are some areas in parks where we are making a very concerted effort to remove invasive weeds. But it is a big problem, and we get a lot of calls in about the spread of non-native invasives. It's across the county. It's like climate change. It's a problem that is bigger than one agency can manage on its own. But this specific request is an attempt to protect our infrastructure without using chemicals.
Got it. That's very helpful. I don't propose at the moment to move Tier 2 to Tier 1, but I'll consider that as we go through the budget process for that reason, because that elevates that particular line item for me. Thank you. I yield back to, I can buy a little bit of time. So thank you all very much for your continued dedication
I
and
think
leadership.
Councilmember Joando is next.
Great.
So
All right.
thank you.
Thank you, Vice President, and for stepping up. Good morning, good to see you. And as a member of the PHP committee, no new news here. I agree with what we did, and so I know Mr. Sartori's holding his breath there. But I did want to provide my colleagues just with the context, some context, and just say this again. So one of the reasons I went along with the agreement to put that 908,000 that's in the packet, that is just restored. That's not on any list. It's included in the budget. And if you read the things in there, contractual increases to meet the department's obligations to sustain current level of services at existing parks. So like maintenance, and we have new parks coming online. These are things that we agreed that people are coming to parks. You got to maintain what's there. But I don't think they're unique. I think there are other areas in the budget where this exists. And I brought up in E&C the related usage of digital materials for libraries, which since the pandemic, if you don't know, it's totally switched. Now most of the materials are digital, just because and it's like that's a good thing. One of the things in their budget, which is on the new increased list when we get there, but I'm saying it now because I think this is the first item we're going over. People are coming to our online library to download books and to read periodicals, and if that funding is not included, less people will be able to do that. I just think we need to understand that, and I think that's not a good thing. I would imagine you all agree, but it's on the list, and meeting the needs of increased park obligation, or more people going to facilities, which also increased during the pandemic, is just being included here. So I don't think those are being treated exactly the same. I just wanted to highlight that. Though I support doing this. I'm not saying take this away. I'm saying do the other the same way. And I also I'm very frustrated over the last 6 years that we always have to restore such a large portion of the park and planning budget. And for example, for things like this, and I asked OMB, and I'm not going to put her on the spot today because it wasn't her decision, but I said to please take back to the county executive that if we have contractual increases to maintain parks, that should be reflected in your budget request for parks. We shouldn't have to always restore that. And so I just think you can disagree on additional things, that's fine, but this type of stuff should make it in. And so I just wanted to provide that context for colleagues. I agree with that. I will also agree with supporting the tranche in all those things in number one, which are important. It's not an insignificant number at $452,000, but they're all very important. And that was the compromise we made to break out some of the tier 2 items and give them a chance, but we did remove some things. So appreciate Parks working with us, appreciate my colleagues on the committee, and appreciate the time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Appreciate the Vice President stepping in there. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had a follow-up or two that I didn't get to last round regarding, well, let me take a step back. The Tier 1 and Tier 2. I very much appreciate the PHP committee for doing that. It is similar to what we did last year with high priority and priority. I didn't know that we were going to be doing that again this year because we were told we weren't delineating lists, and so particularly when we get to T&E, everything is just put on. Can't speak for any other committees, but the instructions I was given was not to delineate lists. But I think lists are helpful. And so diving into that tier 2 list, the lease of high volume mowers, are those electric mowers?
They are not. We want to, but the availability of high volume electric mowers, I don't know if they exist right now, but where we're focusing on electric or electrifying our equipment. With our larger pieces of equipment, it's harder to, or there is no availability of an electric option. So it's not electric.
The Department of Environmental Protection is undergoing a robust outreach campaign to all of our contractors as we require them to transition in the next year. And so as we start requiring our private sector to transition to electric,
We have been. A lot of our handheld equipment is now transitioning over to electric.
Okay.
We've been doing things like we have trucks now that are equipped with power where you can recharge the electric equipment. But and ladies and gentlemen, this is Shuchi Vera. She's our Management Services Division Chief, and she oversees the operating budget. As Ms. Vera was just saying, some of the larger equipment, and these are big mowers, it's very difficult to find electric, but we're working on it. And because it would be a lease rather than a purchase, it does a couple things. It allows us to have that flexibility that as the technology changes, we can switch over to electric, and also means we're not waiting for people to fix the stuff, which is actually a problem that we're having right now, which is this was our Southern Region Division Chief requested this as a pilot because she was having such a challenge with the mowers that we own.
Okay. Thank you for that. I hear the desire to make that change, and hopefully over the next few months or year we can make that change. So thank you. Other question is not something on the lists, but it is extremely timely, and I want to use this opportunity to ask you about it, Director Figueredo, particularly about the North Potomac horse stables, which I have received a lot of correspondence from over the weekend. And given there is a financial aspect which has been put into the public awareness of this issue, can you just briefly elaborate for us what's going on there?
Yes, the Potomac Horse Center is a private equestrian business that had a lease on parkland for 30 years. Recently, we learned of some serious structural deficiencies to particularly the main barn. All of these things were the obligation of the tenant to maintain over time, but unfortunately, they're in very poor condition. We were working with Potomac Horse Center to help them, support them in coming up with a plan for raising the funds needed to bring the facility to a state of good repair and to be able to keep their equestrian operation ongoing. They ultimately made the decision to vacate the premises.
Is this something a bond bill or some other outside funding would have helped to mitigate?
Well, I mean, it's at least probably about $5 million worth of work that would be required to bring the facility up to any kind of safe condition.
Okay. We can talk offline, but appreciate you publicly sharing what the situation is, because a lot of people are curious. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Fonda Gonzalez.
Wow, safe condition. That's like meaning it's going to close down. Like, if it's not safe, how can it be operating? Looking forward to following up on that item. Not right now, but yes. I would say, as a member of PHP committee, I would like to share my strong support of the PHP recommendation. It was really a compromise. There's some items on tier 2 that I thought should be in tier 1. But again, this is how it is. It's a compromise, and I will be supporting some of these items in my efforts when I start voting on things. But again, thank you so much to the Parks and Planning Commission for all their work, making sure that our community has quality of life. You guys are critical for Montgomery County, and I honestly, I hope we can give you everything you need, because maybe people don't see it, but having those trails, having parks for kids to entertain, especially if they're low-income community members who don't have the money to go to Disney World, this is really essential. And the activities that are happening there, having the ice rink, having, there's so much going on here that is so critical to make sure the community has opportunity. It's important, and I just wanted to put my words on in connection with the PHP recommendation. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Malcolm.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for the packet and all the work that's gone in, not only from the Parks Department, but staff and the committee. Just briefly on the Potomac Horse Center, I just wanted to thank Parks for working very closely with the lessee there, as well as the community. And this is a beloved center, and from the perspective of it's a very difficult, nuanced situation, but safety is the key. And I just appreciate all the diligence that you've done in coming to a resolution. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sales.
Thank you. How often do we visit our parks to check on structural, resilience or capacity of different park structures?
Structures that are parks owned and maintained, that are under our direct supervision and responsibility. We are in those facilities every day, our maintenance teams, and staying on top of keeping our buildings in good repair.
And what about things on park land that's leased? How do we protect those investments?
So it depends on the terms of a particular lease, who is responsible for what kind of maintenance or capital improvements.
So it's not consistent across the board with any lease land that we have?
It depends on the lease, yes.
Okay. Can we get an update on what land is leased in parks, and what percentage, how many privately owned properties are on leased land across our parks?
Sure, we can get you that information.
Thank you.
Councilmember Mink.
Thank you. Appreciate the work of the committee and of Parks and Planning, and wanted to appreciate especially the work by the committee to highlight those items where, as Councilmember Jawando also highlighted, that maintaining the same services in light of increased usage is really resulting in an increase in cost, but it's not because we're improving the services. Unfortunately, we would love to, but it's a tight budget and all that. But highlighting where it on our lists, it would otherwise it would appear as an increase, but really what we're doing is funding what's necessary to maintain those same services for the public. And so appreciate the work of the committee to highlight that, and certainly want to encourage all of the committees as these come before us, that I think we would all appreciate, to make sure that we fully understand where those pieces hold true as well. And I will also note, as a point of personal privilege, that we just had a birthday party for one of my kids at Hillendale Park, and it was a lot of fun, and we negotiated the many tables there that were shaded, along with a baby shower and a family barbecue, and we all perfectly used the amount of space that was there, and it was wonderful. So thank you all for the diligence that you do to make sure you're able to accommodate the public without waste. And I yield.
And I'll note, among other things, the fanciest bathrooms in the entire park system at Hillendale Local Park.
I will note also on that, if I may, Mr. President, that also I saw an adult, I don't know if it was a family member or a caretaker, but with an adult with disabilities both go into one of those bathrooms, and it really highlighted one of the reasons that it's important to have those individual bathrooms, and also to have bathrooms that are not identified by gender, so people can feel free to use them as needed.
Yeah, single stall, accessible, and beautiful, actually. Appreciate you noting that. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much. It's rare that people say our bathrooms are beautiful, but Mr. President, I appreciate that. First off, I appreciate the work of the committee and the department itself, and for everything that you do. When you get down to the Tier 1 and Tier 2 list, and I agree with Councilmember Glass, when Air Committee didn't do that either. We said it's either on or it's not. Maybe this is a better idea, I don't know, but if certain things on the list, if you didn't do one part of it, is there things that are combined, that are connected in any way? You can't exactly tell. I mean, the idea for the high volume mowers, if you didn't have it, how much more work is somebody going to have to do in order to have? And I agree with the lease idea.
Right.
You're not buying it, so therefore you're getting it faster. All of that, but I just want to know how it could be combined.
How I'm sorry.
What you'd be saving in manpower, in personnel, et cetera, because you're.
So for the high volume mowers specifically, the impact there, if we don't do this pilot, is that you might see a decline in maintenance standards in some of the parks where we're not able to mow as frequently because we're having trouble getting parts for the mowers that we own, and we're having trouble getting them fixed. That would be the impact there.
Well, and I appreciate it, even for the other things on the list. I mean, obviously, we don't want weeds, but we need to figure out what it does and it doesn't do for us. I think that would be helpful to me to get that information.
Okay, yes.
And thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks. Just to clarify, it has been traditional since long before I got here for the park and planning budgets to be tiered. Long before there was a priority and high priority last year. The reason for that is that this is an independent agency. It's kind of a hybrid between a county government department and MCPS, where we are providing them funding. And in this case, we have more ability to guide and direct the funding because we make up their work program and we appoint their board. They don't have an independently elected board like the school system. And so that is not a change. That has been the approach that we have taken in every budget that I have been a part of here, and took place prior to me arriving, and all but you, Councilmember Katz, being here, and maybe even for you. The question that the committee grappled with was whether or not to tranche the tiers. Historically, what had been most traditional is that the department would put forward their tiers, we might move around some items within the tiers, and then we would tranche them as block items. And there was concern and sensitivity to do that because of the significant funding challenges that we had. And so the decision was made to put forward the Tier 1 as a block, as we have traditionally done, and for the Tier 2 items to leave them out as individual items, where if there is a majority of council members who want to fund them, frankly at the expense of other funding priorities, that we would have the ability to do it, but on an individual item basis. There was quite a bit of debate and discussion on that. Ultimately that was the compromise where we landed. Many of the items, actually, the Councilmember Sales was talking about how important they were. That was the very conversation, almost word for word, in terms of how important they were during the committee. And that was really the thrust of the discussion that we were having. So those points are well taken. Your points are well taken. But I just want to be very clear. The reason why it's being done this way is because it is an outside agency, it is funded differently than county departments. There is an interest, and has always been an interest, to have some level of deference, as I noted in the beginning in my comments, to the agency for their funding priorities in that sense. So just to clarify, and again, that has been a long-standing practice of the way that we have approached the park and planning budget as part of the reconciliation of the overarching budget. I don't see any other colleagues wishing to speak on the parks budget. I haven't heard any recommendations for changes to the committee recommendation, so without objection, we'll move on from the committee recommendation and on the Parks Department and move to the Planning Department committee recommendations. I'll turn to you, Ms. Dunn, and then we'll take a straw vote at the end on this, but we'll take, unless there are amendments which we can vote on, we'll go without objection on the committee recommendations.
Great, thank you. So we're turning to the MNC PPC Administration Fund, which I had noted earlier includes the Bi-County Central Administrative Services, the Commissioner's Office, and the Planning Department. And the total tax-supported budget request for this administration fund for FY25 is $45.2 million, representing a $5.2 million increase of 12.5% over the FY24 adopted budget. And again, as we've mentioned, the CE's recommended budget falls below this amount, and therefore that is why both the the Commissioner's Office, the Planning Department, and CAS come with reductions they would have to make to meet that CE budget. And then the discussion with the committee is what amount of those reductions are relevant and either support a base budget or our new and enhanced programs. If you will see on page 10 of the staff report, we note for you that in the Planning Department, the budget is by the 10 different divisions that they have. There's the Director's Office, Management Services, Communications, IT, Strategic Projects, and then, as you're most likely aware, the Down County Planning, Mid County, Up County, and then we have Regulatory Coordination and Review, Countywide Planning, Support Services, and Grants. And you can see there what was adopted in FY24, and then what the request is in 25, and the % change over that FY24 budget. And then similar to what we showed for the Park Fund, we have on page 11 of the staff report a full page that summarizes these changes for the Planning Department between FY24 and FY25 items. In the base, new initiatives are listed there. We have one-time funding initiatives, increase requested of over $600,000, and then new initiative funding ongoing. Also requested at over $600,000, and then you can see the totals. In the staffing for the Planning Department, it was proposed at 156 positions. It's an increase of 5 new positions, plus the request for funding of a currently unfunded position. You'll note that this is one of the places where the addendum comes into play. There was a request. Every year, staff provides a series of questions to the Parks and the Planning Department as we're preparing the budget review. And in Planning's response to some of those questions, they had noted that in their initial budget, in their budget request, they had asked to move a position from the Countywide Planning and Policy Division into the Information Technology and Innovation Division. But as they've worked through and looked at the questions being asked and were prepared to come and talk to the council, they decided not to follow through with that request of moving that position. In the budget resolution, funding for park and planning, for planning in particular, is done by division. So you will see actually line items for the director's office, up county planning, down county planning. And so it's important that you be aware if they don't want to move this position, it will change where that funding occurs. And so we want to put that before the council's eyes. The next thing we usually talk about with respect to planning, though, is the work program. And this is because analysis of the work program and the associated budget are really structured around what is in the work program schedule, what are the new initiatives, and what are the professional funding sources that are needed to provide that work program. And you can see in the staff report we have the work program for FY25. The council was given the work program, an overview of it at their semi-annual by the planning department back in March. Didn't make any changes to it at that time. The Parks, Housing, and Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee had a conversation about the work program, reviewed it. It's in the staff report, and they did not make any changes to it. You will note again, this is where I noted in the addendum, Planning has mentioned that they have a handful of very minor slight delays that they are adding to that work program as they work through things with their staff and look at their calendars, and those are noted in the staff report. If there are any adjustments to be made to the work program, now is the time. We do include that work program chart in the budget resolution for the Park and Planning Commission. It doesn't mean that it can't change, that delays can't occur. Those happen. You know, it's a long process to do a master plan, but it is an indication of direction and what the council's expecting and when they do expect it. And so not only are the master plans included in that work schedule, there's also a bunch of new initiatives and studies that get included. Those are also in the staff report, and you'll see those listed. And again, there was just one minor change to delivery of one of those. I don't know if the Council President wants to have any conversation about this before heading into the adjustments suggested by the committee.
I don't see any questions or comments, so why don't we go into the committee adjustments?
Great. So the adjustments to the administration fund will be covered in 3 separate segments. There's the Commissioner's Office, there's the Planning Department, and then there's Central Administrative Services. For the Commissioner's Office for FY25, there was a request for about $1.4 million, and this would be an increase of a little over $194,000 over the FY24 budget, and primarily was an increase to other services and charges. The committee's recommendation for the Commissioner's Office was to remove a new public affairs specialist position and to remove the new strategic communications support contract, and to place a seasonal intern position on the new and enhanced program list. Take a pause there or not? Keep going?
Let's just keep going, and then we'll open it
Circle back to all?
to questions
Sure.
on all of them.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful.
Great. In the Planning Department's share of the administration fund to meet the C's budget was $1 million. The committee recommended the following changes. It has requested and recommends to retain a little over $258,000 in funding, again noting that these items were necessary to maintain the department's current service levels and fulfill its work program, as was already discussed today. Those things include support services for the Georgia Avenue plan, which is on the work program, the Friendship Heights plan being added to the work program. There's some basic funding as a grant for a Safe Streets match for parking lot design. And then it places in 2 tiers on the new and enhanced programs list, funding for some new positions and some other professional service funding. But you will note the first tier is made up of 3 positions. These are all regulatory planning positions. They are partially paid back by funds that are collected for the review of development applications, and really support the increase in applications that the Planning Department has seen over the last year and expect to continue to see in the year to come. And so to be able to meet the deadlines for those applications that are in the county code, they need the reviewers to do that. But they are new positions, and so therefore they did get as their own tier on the new and enhanced program list as tier 1.
Yeah, I just want to note on that, this was part of the discussion of whether or not these should be included in the base budget or not. We decided not to include them in the base budget after discussion, although there was a discussion among staff of whether or not they should be included in it. So I just want to note the committee did take quite a bit of time really thinking through what should be included in the base budget versus what should be viewed as new and enhanced programs. I think these are very important for us to maintain our commitments, but they are new and enhanced positions for service. So I just want to make sure I noted that. Let's continue.
Correct. Thank you. And then you'll see Tier 2 also in the staff report, and in it has a climate initiatives planner, the racial equity and social justice chief position that was mentioned earlier by Director Sartori, a planning academy, the mapping segregation project phase 2, and the burial sites context study contract. Those are in the Tier 2 for consideration on the list.
Yeah, so why don't we stop there and let's open it up to colleagues. I just want to note a couple things. One, I just want to credit Director Sartori for his work. We have 2 items here, the Planning Academy and the Racial Equity and Social Justice Chief, that was strongly supported by the committee. We've been having these conversations. It's been a major commitment of him and his new role. It's been a major initiative of the department to figure out how to embed equity into every aspect of the planning process, understanding that there is so much when we talk about racial equity and social justice, at the local level in particular, are grappling with these issues. Land use and zoning and the regulatory review process is very much at the heart of many of those initial conversations. And so, this is just really, really important. And then obviously, if you look at some of the other initiatives as well, it's really focused on racial equity, social justice, and climate. And so I will let you know, eliminated a number of asks here that we just didn't think rose to this level. And we didn't think were at the council and the county's highest priority, as well as the planning department's highest priority, and really did whittle this list down to what we feel are essential. I also wanted to note the Planning Academy in particular was a major part of the conversation of the working group with state partners and with the executive branch as a way to address some of the concerns with the land use and zoning process being very cumbersome and very challenging, and creating equity issues in its complication and its challenge. And so the Planning Academy is not the only solution to that challenge, but it is a primary vehicle to address many of those issues. And I'll just close by saying the Racial Equity and Social Justice Chief, there were discussions about having that be a lower level position, actually more analogous to other organizations even within county government. And I will credit Director Sartori, who felt very strongly that this be a senior level position in the director's office with the full weight of the department behind it to ensure that it has the span of control and the gravitas that is appropriate for this type of position. So it is expensive, but it is very much in line with core priorities that we have, and just want to acknowledge colleagues for their support of this, our very strong support at the committee, but the thoughtfulness of the entire department, of the chair, and of Director Sartori, as wanting to move forward and take this department to a new level in terms of its professionalism, but also a new level in terms of its inclusiveness and its intentionality. So appreciate that. Let me turn to colleagues. I'm going to start with Councilmember Sales, who had questions about racial equity and social justice on the Parks Department and the Planning Department. So I wanted to turn to her on that, and then turn to other colleagues in the queue.
Well, I see that the Racial Equity and Social Justice Chief was lapsed for 4 months. I see it's on Tier 2. And so we're going to have to make decisions about what would be at a loss as we're moving forward over the next year if we don't fund this position. But I know that there's other parts of the budget that have, my question was about how are we using data to guide the infrastructure investments or the program plans across the community, whether we're putting equipment for aerobics in one particular park or how we're building the park. So I'm just wondering what this chief position would do, and if we don't have it, how are we still going to be able to advance racial equity and social justice in our parks and planning efforts moving forward?
Sure. So within the planning department, a lot of that we don't implement that infrastructure. We'll create the plans that might call for certain types of infrastructure, and then we rely on the private sector or other agencies to do a lot of that implementation, or our sister agency in the Parks Department. But in terms of data, I mean, we are very data focused and data oriented and data driven in the planning department, even particularly when you're talking about equity in our engagement efforts. We're making a concerted effort now to get a better capture of the folks who are participating in our engagement processes, so that we can see how well the people we're talking to about plans reflect the communities that we're planning for. And so, data is just a massive component of what we do. In terms of that equity chief position, this is a position that we don't currently have.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to make clear is that as planners, equity is at the core of what we do. It's a requirement of our jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a responsibility for every single person in our department to take an equity lens to the work that they do on a daily basis. However, what this position would be is someone who would provide an overarching kind of framework within the department of how to integrate equity in our work. So I would be, in looking to hire someone for this, I wouldn't be looking for someone who is just an equity person or is just another planner, but someone who's actually done the work of integrating equity into the planning process, so that they can be an advisor to each of our project teams. They can help our internally, our HR staff in hiring and recruitment from a more diverse workforce. And our engagement teams and communications efforts can all be informed by the expertise that this person brings to the table. We also have internally an equity peer review group that is a collection of planning staff who meet with all of our project managers at various stages of those projects. And this person would, basically the idea is early in the project to be able to ask questions that will guide the project from an equity lens, through an equity lens, and then later on, when they have preliminary recommendations, to be able to see how well informed those recommendations are by that equity lens. And the person in this role would be providing oversight to that committee, to that group within the department, to ensure that they've got the education and experience necessary to be able to provide those recommendations to the project managers and project teams, and just ensure that we are integrating that thoroughly in all of our efforts.
And so is the lapse for 4 months has to do with recruitment?
Well, yeah. Okay. It's a good question. So in part, it helps save a little bit of the cost for this budget year. Obviously, this is a position, so in FY26, if this is funded in FY25, it would require a full year of annualization of that. But, if we get this funding, we can start recruiting for it as soon as possible, but, the process takes a while. And we would want to do a pretty broad search, not just locally, but nationally on this, make sure that we are doing a really broad reach in terms of our recruitment efforts. So I think 4 months would be how long it would take for us to hire that person.
Yeah, I definitely think it's an important role and should be moved to a higher tier. Overall, I agree with all of the other recommendations. I did have a question about the communications role in the commissioner's office. Is there someone already doing that work, and would this be in addition to what they're doing, or new activities?
Yes, we now have a full board, very engaged, and so and out there in the public, and so this would be a new position. However, given budget constraints this year, we put it on the back burner so that Parks and Planning will have the money they need to move their initiatives forward.
Okay, all right. We just want to make
sure. Also, we would also be using some of the Parks communication staff for the board. So we'll still be communicating, but through some of the current parks communication.
Yeah, when I see a role like communications, given how many colleges we have here with the universities at Shady Grove, University of Maryland, it just seems like we should be a bit more creative with recruiting college students for these roles. If it's to highlight something out of the commissioner's office related to strategic communications,
Right.
we could look at some of these roles through our local
And some of the
institution.
intern, if that's
Yes,
added back, would
exactly.
be helpful for that. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sales. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm a little confused on page 14 of your packet. The tier ones for the funding for the three different new and enhanced programs. I understand that it with there's a a note that this is for applicable chargebacks, but how did you come up with those numbers?
Sure. So, yeah, so each of these positions is offset, the salaries for them are slightly offset by that chargeback, and it varies for each one. So I think for that first one, I think it's just a 30% offset, whereas the second one is a 50% offset, and then the third one is a 90% offset.
So was it based on monies that you would have received from years prior? How did you come up with those percentages?
It's based on their work program and how much it would be focused on development review and the review of development applications for which we receive fees from applicants, and that goes into our development review special revenue fund, which goes to pay for the salaries of people.
I understand that part, but I don't know how you can predict what you're going to get for next year. That's my question.
That is always, we take a look at, the trends and the number of applications that we received from years prior. Yeah. And, in this particular case, the share that we allocate to that is based on what we expect that person to be, their work program to be focused on. But in terms of how much we anticipate in that special revenue fund, that'll vary each year depending on, it is a highly volatile potential source of revenue for the department, not knowing how many development applications we're going to get in any year.
That's my question. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Glad.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Sartori, for the work that you and your team continue to do. Very much appreciated. I support the committee recommendations, but just want to use this as an opportunity as we're talking about this budget. I want to get a plug in for next year's budget, if we can think that far ahead already, but
I am.
Good, good. So the Transportation and Environment Committee has spent considerable time over the last number of months talking about water and sewer category change requests. One of the most exciting aspects of county government, and I say that teeing up the WSSC conversation that's about to happen, but it was a very good conversation that we had, and the council supported our recommendations. The point that I want to deliver is that 8 of the issues that we dealt with specifically were regarding changes to sewer category changes, and there are ways to mitigate that moving forward, particularly including a limited amendment to the Potomac sub-region master plan. And a limited amendment to the Potomac sub-region master plan is not in this work schedule, but as we continue talking about growth and infrastructure in Montgomery County and different types of housing stocks, I share that with you now because I know as a member of the T&E committee, if I can speak on behalf of all my colleagues, having more clarity regarding growth and infrastructure policy regarding sewer would be helpful. I'll look at you, Chair Harris, as well. So just want to get that plug in as you conclude this budget and start working on the next one.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll certainly take those comments into consideration as we think about our future work program.
I don't see any other colleagues wishing to speak on this, so without objection, it seems like there is support for the committee recommendations on the planning department. and the Commissioner's office. Anything else you'd like to cover?
There's a couple items still to cover today, but the next one would be the Central Administrative Services budget. It is following the section on planning in the staff report. The Central Administrative Services has an allocation of costs between the two counties, 45.1% to Montgomery County and 54.9% to Prince George's County, with the exception of the Merit System Board, which is split 50-50 each year. The CE's recommended budget would have required CAS to reduce its portion of the administration fund by just over $845,000. Again, as the Commissioner's Office, Parks, Planning have all done, they identify tiers for those recommended reductions, and they usually produce some savings, recommended savings, and offered reductions as well. The committee recommends unanimously that for the CAS budget, approximately $461,845 in funding is restored or retained over the CE's recommended cut, as these items are deemed necessary for CAS's current level of service. Those are in the staff report, and you'll see that the first 4 of those all have to do with annualizations of increases related to funding of positions last year. So they really are about a prior decision that was made for funding, and they implement the needed funding for those positions. The 5th position to be restored, though, is a new supplier diversity chief. The committee did talk a long time about this since it is a new position. There were another new position, which was an ADA coordinator. They did not opt to put both on the restore list, but they did put the diversity supplier chief on the list at the urging of staff from CAS. And so what you have before you is this restored list. There was some question about the ADA coordinator position. And then you had a whole list of other positions that CAS themselves had offered in their reply to staff questions as offered savings or reductions for this year to meet the budget constraints of Montgomery County. So with that, that's CAS.
Yeah, I'll just note I am in active conversations, as is staff, with our counterparts in Prince George's County. We ultimately have to come to an agreement on this. If we don't come to an agreement, there is kind of Armageddon scenario that has significant budget consequences. So the impetus is certainly on us coming to agreement, which we nearly always do. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do that. Feel like we'll be in a positive place. I will say that the Prince George's County Council has a lot of interest in a number of the positions, including positions that were not recommended, that were accepted as potential cuts, and so that's something we're going to have to work through and work out, and hopeful that over the next 24 to 48 hours, we'll have something to offer to colleagues. But as a starting point, we have the committee's recommendation for what we thought was a reasonable approach to move forward. Let me turn it to Councilmember Sales.
Thank you. Can you tell me more about this ADA position? Because I'm looking at our portion, it looks like it's $10,000. And so I'm wondering why we would need to delay such an important position.
I'm going to find that here in a second. The amount that was offered from Central Administrative Service related to the coordinator, what they offered was a delay in hiring. And so if you delayed hiring, and again, you're sharing the cost with Prince George's County, the amount doesn't look like a lot. Again, it's again, the ongoing position, it would be something annual that would come back.
Yeah. So can we?
The cost, if we were to actually fund the position, would be higher than what's in this, offered reduction, because it's not just, you're not saving 2 months of hiring, you will now be funding the amount for the year. It's almost backwards. Like the amount that they're putting forward to save is $10,000, but the cost, if you were to restore it, right, would be much greater.
Yeah, if we have an opportunity to restore this position, I would like for it to be restored.
Appreciate that. If there is an interest, there could be a formal motion here. If not, that would be part of the discussion in the back and forth with Prince George's County, and there is an interest. I will say that is the other position that the Central Administrative Services did put forward as one that they wanted to see restored, but that they were willing to lapse, for a period of months. And so that is part of the conversation. So the choices would be whether or not, there's an interest among colleagues to formally motion to restore that money and add it, or whether or not that would be part of the negotiation with Prince George's County to ultimately land in a place where both they and we can agree. I don't see a second for that motion, but as noted, that is very much at the heart of the negotiation and the discussion. So we will come back to colleagues with that, and imagine that there will be some discussions, before the body to weigh that position in particular.
Thank you.
I don't see any other comments or questions from colleagues. So without objection, we will accept the recommendation on CAS, and we'll remind everybody that this is going to have to come back to us, and this is a separate process from the standard reconciliation process, because we have to work out the negotiation with Prince George's County.
Correct, and I'll just remind the council, the bi-county meeting where both councils meet to approve this portion of the budget occurs on Thursday of this week.
Yeah, so the hope is the next 24 to 48 hours, as I noted, we will have something before colleagues to determine whether or not there's consensus on both sides to be able to move forward.
Great. With that, we're going to move on to some other funds. The reason this is put before the committee and the council are these funds support the work program, obviously, of the planning department and the parks department, but they impact the appropriation. They don't typically impact the tax-supported portion of the budget, but you do need to see them. So there's the property management enterprise, and we call it ALARF, but it is the Advanced Land Acquisition Revolving Fund. And those are in the staff report. You're provided, what was adopted in FY24 for the budget, what's requested for 25, the change, and some discussion of what those items are. But the committee had no recommended reductions nor placements on the enhancement list for these unique funding structures. Not seeing any questions, we'll move on. There's also something called the special revenue funds. These are funds that are used to account for proceeds from specific revenue sources that are legally restricted to expenditures for specific purposes, and they're all listed out for you in the staff report. You can see what those funds are and how they are defined. The expected revenue over the course of FY25 is about $7.6 million. Over the FY24 adopted budget, expenditures will slightly exceed this at around $9 million. But you will see that it would bring a balance to these funds as a whole to around $3.2 million. So they're not in danger of going below what we already have as a balance, which is nice. There has been a request for $950,000 transfer from the administration fund to support the development review special revenue fund, and that would bring its balance close to $1.4 million. This gets a Councilmember Katz's question about the funding of the sources. We retain a balance in that account, so there isn't a fear that we won't bring in quite enough money to cover the positions we're requesting. And the committee supports that transfer and didn't have any further recommendations to changes to the special revenue funds. With that, similar to the departments being asked to answer questions about racial equity and social justice at the budget time, we also always pose to the Parks, Planning, and Central Administrative Services to comment on their efforts at racial equity and social justice in their work programs and in the budgetary process. And so you'll see quite a number of pages where they reply and respond to us on how they are incorporating these issues in the way they think about their work program and their budget. And those are on several pages of the staff report. And with that, that will conclude, unless there's any questions for them about that. We do have some state aid to the CIP that I want to cover this morning, just to get it before the council. It doesn't change your funding, but it is something you might want to hear about. Can we move forward with that?
Yeah, let's, why don't we take a straw vote here on the committee recommendations for MNC PPC, and then you can give that as an update, since there's no decision points on the state aid. It doesn't impact our local funding portion. So with that, I'll call for a straw vote on the committee recommendation on MNC PPC. That is unanimous. Ms. Dunn, if you want to share the update on state funding, all good news.
Great. Yes, I'd love to. It is great news, a little bit mixed. So the 2024 General Assembly ended on April 8th, as most of you know, and the Parks Department did receive additional appropriation of about $1.1 million, and that is listed at the very end of the staff report. At the same time, the final program open space allocation received from the state was significantly less than the amount that was in the proposed budget. As a result, the Parks Department must reduce their program open space appropriation by that amount. It is an appropriated amount. They took several projects that they were receiving program open space funding or hoping to receive it in, and made those adjustments. Those are on the last page of the staff report. You'll see where those adjustments are being made and how much. But again, and the hope is that in future years, and I'm sure Director Figueredo can talk to this, the hope is that the program open space money will increase then in the future. So it doesn't affect anything in the next coming year. A delay of one thing by 1 year, and then the rest is not a problem.
Anything to add, Director Figueredo?
No.
Okay, perfect. All right, I don't see any colleagues wishing to speak. Obviously appreciate the ongoing partnership with the state. Huge impact on our ability to deliver parks and park services to our residents. We certainly couldn't do it without the significant levels of state support, which have been tremendous over the last several years, and I want to acknowledge and lift that up. With that, we are through MNC PPC and this aspect of this week. We're going to move on to items 3 and 4, work sessions on the FY25 operating budget and FY25 to 30 CIP for WSSC Water, and I'm going to turn it over to Chair Glass and then to Mr. Levchenko as needed. Chair Glass.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'll wait for the WSSC team to trickle on up to the table. Thank you for listening.
I actually was sorry I won.
Touché. We're here all week. Fantastic. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. Good morning, General Manager Powell and Commissioner Bayonet. And I don't see any other commissioners who are here, so thank you for representing. Colleagues, the WSSC Water FY25 operating budget is incredibly important to Montgomery County and to the region because WSSC delivers 162 million gallons of water to our residents here in Montgomery County and Prince George's County every day. And so the operating budget to accommodate that vital need is $1.02 billion, which is an increase of $88 million. And it has to be noted that WSSC did make some cuts on their own in order to meet the rate cap that we in Prince George's agreed to last year, which was 8.5%. And as the T&E committee continues working with WSSC, there are ongoing challenges with water systems throughout the country as we become more efficient, yet the costs of maintaining our systems continues to increase. And so that is the dynamic that we are dealing with in this budget, and we will continue dealing with in future budgets. But as was assured to us in committee, there are best practices among the industry leaders that we'll continue leaning on. Before I turn it over to Mr. Levchenko, I'll see if General Manager Powell might have any opening comments.
Thank you, Chair Glass, and thank you, council members, for having us here this morning to answer whatever questions you have regarding our fiscal year 2025 operating and capital budgets. I'm joined by my team members, and I also want to defer to our Commissioner, Bayonet, if you have any comments first. Commissioner, Vice Chair Foster could not be here this morning, but she's here in spirit.
Fantastic. She's watching.
Okay, I'll proceed. The last time we were at this point of the process, I was new, and now we have a new CFO who has been presented before the committee, Munetsi Musara. And we also now have a new chief engineer who is, I don't know if he's been here a month yet. So he is digging in and literally drinking from a fire hose, Iyad Mazzani. And then, of course, we're joined by Letitia Carolina Powell, who is our budget director, and Sunil Pandaya is our capital manager on the capital side and finance as well. I don't have any extended comments, but I will raise that in the course of this process this year, we finally received word a couple of weeks ago from the EPA who published their regulations for PFAS. Those are the forever chemicals that we have been talking about, that we were anticipating new regulation. I know it's been discussed at MWCOG extensively. Thank you, Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez, for allowing us to use that forum to talk about the challenges. We're facing what could be very expensive upgrades for our facilities to ensure that we continue our track record of now 106 years of no drinking water quality violations and providing the safest, cleanest drinking water to our customers, 1.9 million customers. This budget does include funding for us to start with a pilot to test technology to see what would be most appropriate for our facilities. We are continuing work to understand what we would need to move forward with. We're also engaged in a drinking water, source water protection partnership with others in the region around the Potomac River to make sure that we understand what the potential impacts might be as we see fluctuations in levels of PFAS in the source water. So those are some of the things that we're doing. We're also now addressing lead and copper. We'll be finishing up an inventory to understand where there are remaining lead service lines in our service area that need to be removed. We'll be coming back before you, hopefully, at least the committee, to discuss our findings. And there's other work that we need to do to make sure that we are efficient as possible as a utility. And we understand the need to balance investment with affordability, which is why, as part of our operating budget, we increased customer assistance funding by 121%. So we continue to have that on our radar, and we're looking even now at how we develop more customer assistance programs to help those that are having challenges. So with that, I don't know if you have anything else you want to share, Nancy.
Morning. Just wanted to really thank the T&E committee members and Mr. Levchenko for supporting our budget, and we are available to answer any questions that you may have.
Very good. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Mr. Levchenko to walk us through.
Yeah, I'm going to work through the cover sheet of the staff report, which summarizes the major points, and then, of course, we have lots of folks here who can answer questions if we want to go a little deeper. You heard, or Mr. Glass mentioned the proposed budget a little over $1 billion. That's about an $88 million increase. Just to dig into that a little bit, Debt service is the largest category of increase, as you can see on the first page. That's about $32 million of that increase, about a 9.7% increase, which does reflect ongoing infrastructure work as the agency has increased its debt over the last 10 to 15 years to catch up on a lot of work and has still a lot of continuing work to do as well. So not a surprise per se. Also, interest rates factor into that as well, so that it can fluctuate a bit based on that as well. The single largest percent increase is actually in regional sewage disposal, which is a charge from DC Water. And in fact, as we noted in the committee, that number is actually low. There's about a $4 million increase above what's in the proposed budget, which they will need to accommodate with additional reductions. So right now those are undesignated reductions, or if there's increased revenue perhaps in beyond what's estimated here. But they will have a $4 million gap they will need to close, even assuming you approve what's before you today, or recommend approval for what's before you today. And actually, I should step back. As you heard with the Park and Planning CAS budget, this budget will be going to the bi-county meeting this Thursday for resolution with our Prince George's Council colleagues. So what we're doing today is putting forth the council's recommendations. We will then work with our counterparts to finalize that for Thursday. And the other important point to make with regard to the operating budget and the CIP is that it's not within the tax-supported framework of the other budgets that you're dealing with. They have their own affordability process, and they have ratepayer revenues and fixed fees that we'll be talking about, but they don't factor into our general fund reserve issues. So we don't have the new and enhanced programs process that you would have with all the other county departments and other tax-supported portions of agencies. So it has its own self-supporting aspect to it with regard to that. I mentioned the debt service and the regional sewage disposal. They also have increase in what's the all other costs. This includes professional services, employee benefits, chemicals, and notably PAYGO. They are recommending an increase in PAYGO of about $6.6 million. So that also is included within that $88 million increase. Within their salary and wage costs, which are a relatively small portion of their budget, especially compared to county government and MCPS as an example, they are recommending compensation increases, which the committee discussed, as well as some position increases, which were also discussed in committee and noted with a little more detail on page 2 of the packet. There's 127 new positions, although 41 of them are conversions from contractual positions, so they're cost neutral. Another 20 of those positions are related to the opening of the new biosolids plant. There are also positions that were hired in prior years that were covered with vacancy savings that would be formally approved as part of this process. And then there's a scattering of other positions, mainly in utility services, the engineering and construction department, and general services departments. And certainly we can talk about any of those if you'd like today. Importantly, I think one of the main highlights, if you will, of this budget is on the revenue side, where the Commission did have a cost of service study that was done by a consultant that was completed late last year. And for some of the reasons that you had mentioned earlier, Mr. Glass, that nationally water and sewer utilities are having to struggle with a stable revenue or unstable revenue situation, given that volumetric rates make up a majority or a dominant majority, in our case, of their revenues. However, with water savings that's been quite significant over the past 20 years, even with increases in population, which we've had, per capita use has dropped so substantially that that revenue has been flat or even declining in some years. And so that's put pressure on operating expenses as well as other fees to try to stabilize their revenues. So as part of that cost of service study, they did look at their fixed fees, which had not been significantly changed since 2017. when the infrastructure investment fee was created. So the account maintenance fee and the infrastructure investment fee currently make up about 10% of their revenues. They're recommending a significant increase in those fees this year, but within the rubric of the spending affordability process that was approved by both councils last year, there would be a corresponding decline in the volumetric rate increase. So while you had mentioned earlier there was an 8.5% maximum rate increase that was approved by both councils, within this budget, the assumption is that that rate increase would be 2.4%. But then you'd see significant increases, about a 65% increase in the fixed fees for the account maintenance fee and the infrastructure investment fee. So overall, the revenues are consistent with spending affordability, but in terms of how they are collected would be quite different. And the impact on the customer base is different than it would be if it was a straight volumetric rate increase. So we can talk a little bit more about that. But staff did support that increase. In fact, the cost of service study would if taken sort of at its full value, would have gone further than this. They're looking at this as an incremental step for now and revisiting it next year. So we can talk more about that. The other fee that is not recommended for change this year is the system development charge. That has not been changed for many, many years. But they are starting to see significant gaps within that fund over the next 6 years. There's different strategies to deal with that, but one would be to look at an increase in that charge, which they're going to be looking at over the next year. So I think there's a lot of interesting change on the revenue side. The expenditure side, we're seeing a lot of the similar trends we've seen in past years with regard to debt service and other ongoing inflationary increases and the regional sewage disposal charges that we're seeing. And then you also heard about some of the ongoing regulatory issues like PFAS that they're having to deal with. And they've also got a number of climate change related initiatives they're pursuing within this, within the rate structure that they're, or within the rate revenue that they're able to generate. So that's something that we can't always predict where those numbers will go, especially in their long-range financial plan. So more to come on that. But for now, I think that's sort of where the committee landed, was that we were supportive of the commission's request. I will note that the executive was also had recommended approval as transmitted.
Great. That is where the committee landed. Thank you, Mr. Levchenko, for diving into the different rates and fee structures as well. I'll note for colleagues' consideration as well, one of the items that we talked about at the committee, and appreciate the thoughtfulness of the committee, my committee colleagues, was regarding residents who contact us with billing questions, which we all get a lot of. And one of the ways to mitigate that is by finally adopting a new metering system, an electronic metering system, which has been talked about over the last number of years but never implemented. And the committee signaled our interest in future budgets and looking into this, which solves two problems. One, it lets people know in real time, or at least closer, more immediately than a quarterly billing cycle, about what their water usage is, so that they can properly plan their household finances. And then secondly, if there are leaks, we'll know in real time, and so that we can mitigate that. I don't know if General Manager Powell has any additional comments, not necessarily about this item, but anything else Mr. Levchenko mentioned?
Well, I just want to say thank you, express thanks again for Mr. Levchenko's very detailed work and the support of the committee to move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. President, there is a committee recommendation 3-0 on this item.
Thank you. We have a committee recommendation. I see Councilmember Lukey would wish to speak, so let me turn it over to her.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this is just a question, and I'm going to support the committee's recommendation. But just as we're forward thinking, and as Councilmember Glass just reminded us about the electronic metering and things we've been thinking about in the forward thinking department. You know, we've had these year-over-year cost increases, right? And respecting the regulatory landscape in which we are now living. But Have you all given any thought to how to help level or balance that out moving forward so that it's not such a steep trajectory? Because we do get those questions from consumers as well.
Yes, I can start and, invite CFO Massara to chime in as well. We recognize that, in terms of balancing affordability with investments, that we have a responsibility to make sure that our operations is as efficient as it can be. We are and have been implementing this last year changes in our approach to how we contract services, specifically under IT. We're looking at some reductions there because we are moving to a different type of approach to manage our systems. There are a number of systems that we have to address that are approaching end of life, and we need to also make sure we're investing in cybersecurity. So that's becomes another expense. So
I was going to say, you just anticipated my next question or my follow-up, so thank you.
Yes. And then in the operations itself, making sure that we're not only investing to update the infrastructure, which is, we've been in service for 106 years with pretty much the same treatment facilities. The new bioenergy facility at Piscataway gives us the promise of being able to reduce operating costs in biosolids management, but also giving us the ability to potentially have alternative sources of revenue, and that's something that we want to explore more. We're thankful that Montgomery County has partnered with us to allow us to supply renewable natural gas for part of the bus fleet, and we'll be looking at other opportunities to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint, but also how we leverage and become more a part of the circular economy. So happy to talk more about the measures that we're identifying. We've launched a Smart One Water initiative to allow us to better leverage technology where we're losing headcount, which is a significant expense for us. We want to be able to invest in the team that we have and make sure that they're trained and fit for future. But we believe we have an opportunity to leverage the tools and technology, which would also drive cost savings as well.
Thank you. And did you have any comments?
The one thing that we have been really focused on is, given the age of our infrastructure, and as I mentioned during the committee meetings, we would like to be more proactive in addressing areas that need direct needs versus when we're proactive, when we are reactive, it's a lot of extra costs and inefficiencies. So we're trying to balance out the need to maintain versus reacting. So that's something that is on the forefront in all our discussions, especially when it comes to the affordability piece.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I appreciate the work of the committee and WSSC and Mr. Levchenko as well. I know that he works hard on this. I just wanted to very publicly thank you and remind you of the concerns that we're having with the Clarksburg Fire Station. It's something that we normally don't have this as an issue, but we certainly do now. They have a fire station that we can't open because of some, I guess, sewer issues from there. And I know that Mr. Dice from Department of General Services has been working directly with WSSC on this. We would like to have it obviously sooner rather than later, but I believe between all the agencies, we can finally get this literally up and running. So we thank you very publicly for all your hard work. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Council Vice President Stewart.
Great. I just wanted to add my thanks. With the challenges that we've discussed about aging infrastructure, decreased demand, PFAS, and thank you to my colleague who's been working on this at MCOG. you all have been working hard, and I just want to lift up, the AAA bond rating you received. There were some questions last year that were raised, but the rating agencies have come back and shown their confidence in you, which I think was no small feat, and I just want to thank you for that hard work. In addition to that, as Councilmember Lukey brought up, affordability and always looking at that. And what I appreciate and just wanted to draw my colleagues' attention to, because I know there's so much material to review this week, is particularly the racial equity lens that you use when looking at affordability and what you've been able to do, put in place. So I just wanted to lift that up for my colleagues and say thank you. General Manager Powell, Commissioner Bayonet, thank you for coming today, and everybody on the team. Appreciate it.
I will echo the thanks and the gratitude. I think in conferring with the T&E chair, we'll take up items 3 and 4 together by straw vote. So, Mr. Levchenko, do you briefly want to describe item 4?
Yeah, we can go through that in a very timely way. Once again, I'll just cover real quickly what's on the summary pages, and if you have any questions, we've got plenty of folks here. The WSSC Water CIP originally came over in late September, and the committee took it up in February. We also did get a mid-cycle update, which is also included in this packet. Not unusual. Often we do have changes with regard to the Blue Plains projects. They also included some additional changes in some of their information-only projects, which are noted here. Notably, some of the PFAS issues that you heard were included in the mid-cycle update. So staff's recommendation today is for the council to support the original CIP as well as the mid-cycle update that impacts the CIP and the information-only projects. The one add-on I have is some additional language that staff had recommended at the committee for the submerged channel intake project. This is a project that it's almost actually 20 years old, that was originally put in place to design and build a mid-river intake on the Potomac River, similar to what Fairfax County has. And there are a lot of benefits to a mid-river intake in terms of water quality and flexibility of having multiple intakes, because they have a shoreline intake now at the Potomac facility. However, the project has been dormant for many years. It requires a lot of new planning work, coordination with the National Park Service because of the connection with that area with the C&O Canal Park. So there's a lot of work that has to get done to move this project forward again. And staff's recommendation was to include language to require WSSC Water to come back to the councils when it has additional planning work done before it is ready to move forward into full design of the project. So because it could be a significantly expensive project with, once again, a lot of operational benefits, but a lot of costs. And staff had recommended that both councils be briefed on it again and be comfortable with it moving forward. So that language was supported by the committee at its first meeting and is reflected in this packet today as well. So with that, I'd just be happy to answer questions or have our WSSC folks here answer questions.
I don't see any questions from colleagues, so I don't think that's necessary at this point. So with that, why don't we take a vote on items 3 and 4, the WSSC operating
we did have one comment that Mr.
Council President, just had
sure.
a follow-up question as it related to affordability. We neglected to mention the fact that we're aggressively and successfully going after external funding, and that will also help limit the impact on the rate increases or the revenue enhancement that we're requesting. So we are extensively and really collectively for FY26 making that one of the strong initiatives that we're going to make sure we'll be discussing with you and letting you know what else we're going to be trying to do.
Thank you. Well, we are strongly in support of aggressively pursuing outside funding that doesn't come from our ratepayers and constituents, so please continue to do that work. With that, we'll take a straw vote on the recommendations for WSSC Water on both the operating and the CIP side as recommended by the Transportation Environment Committee. All those in favor? That is unanimous as a straw vote. Thank you to our colleagues from WSSC Water. We appreciate you joining us. Thank you to Mr. Levchenko, and thank you to the Transportation and Environment Committee for your deliberations. We're going to move on to item 5. Joining us today is Chief Administrative Officer Madaleno with Patricia Swanson, our nominee for the position of Director of Strategic Partnerships in the Office of County Executive. The Director of Strategic Partnerships serves as the lead point of contact for communicating, coordinating, and facilitating council matters in collaboration with partners, such as other county agencies, nonprofits, and other public groups. We scheduled this in haste. I will note, and we did it during budget, which we normally wouldn't have done. The reason why we did that is we want to make sure, given the role and given the importance of the role with the intergovernmental dynamics between the council and the executive branch, we wanted to make sure that this position was ready to go as soon as we get out of budget in June. So appreciate colleagues for your indulgence of the change in the schedule and the normal approach given the urgency, and appreciate our candidate for moving quickly to respond based on where we could make this work, and appreciate Mr. Madaleno and the county executive for putting forward this nominee, and for I know besides the council and the executive who want to make sure we find the right person for this position, I think Mr. Hartman Espada is probably the single person most interested in the filling of this position, since he's currently serving in 2 roles. So with that, let me turn it over to Mr. Madaleno to share with us your interest in this candidate, and thank Ms. Swanson for her interest in coming home, as I would categorize it, although we need to work on the home part of coming home. With that, Mr. Madaleno.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President, Madam Vice President, council members. It's a pleasure to be before you today. I thought you scheduled this just for Ken's birthday. Since last week, we all celebrated together, and you wanted to make sure he had a good year. But I'm thrilled to have Tricia Swanson with us as our nominee for the Director of Strategic Partnerships, which, for people who don't know, that position primarily serves as the liaison to the County Council from the executive branch. I've had the pleasure of knowing Tricia for many years. Tricia grew up in Montana, but came to Maryland to attend Towson with parents who had spent their career in the Foreign Service. Forest Service.
Forest. You said foreign.
Oh, I thought I said forest. Yes, no, I got the forest. Forest. Sorry if I wasn't, if my Montgomery County accent wasn't clear, but the Forest Service. So went to Towson and then the University of Maryland for graduate school. I first started working with Ms. Swanson when she was working in and around the General Assembly. She worked for Senator Astle, who was a longtime senator from District 30 in Annapolis. She worked for Senator Casemeyer, who represented Howard and Baltimore counties. She worked for Delegate Ariana Kelly, who, of course, represented District 16 Bethesda and Montgomery County. Then she went to work for Senator Miller and the Senate President's office. So, and part of her job was working with the committee I served on in the state Senate. She was recruited to be the legislative liaison for the Montgomery County Board of Education. Spent several years working with the board, and I think some of you may have interacted with her initially through that role, certainly some of your staff. Then she went on to the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce, where she was their Director of Government Relations for several years, and then she returned to the state level working for Care First. When we were looking for different people for this position, it was the county executive who said, make sure you give Tricia a call. I saw her in Annapolis and she's interested. And so we did, and we are very fortunate to have someone who understands our legislative process and the work of the county council, having been around it for many years, understands our work with other levels of government, including at the state. Someone who knows many of you, knows many of the staff who work for the county council, and certainly knows our community. So with that, I respectfully ask for your confirmation of Ms. Swanson, because I think she will be an excellent addition to the county government, and again, as the council president said in his opening remarks, someone who can help manage and grow and strengthen the relationship between the executive branch and the legislative branch. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I am going to ask you some questions, then we're going to open it up to colleagues to ask their own. Let me start with my first question. If you could tell us specifically about what in your background and qualifications make you an ideal candidate for this role, Director of Strategic Partnerships.
Before I start, I did also.
Just hit the button.
I never know if you're supposed to touch the mic or you're not supposed to touch the mic. So before I start, I do want to thank the President, Vice President, and members of the Council for taking the time to talk to me today. I know it's an incredibly hectic and busy time, so I do really appreciate the time to talk to all of you this morning. Mr. Madaleno did a fantastic job kind of going over my background, and when I've talked to various people about this position, the main thing I heard was responsiveness and being a point of contact. And that's honestly been my favorite part of each job that I've had. If you look at my resume, I'm not deep diving into any particular policy issue. I really like kind of understanding how all the pieces fit together. But in all of these roles, what was in common is that I was the point of contact for elected leaders to either the principal I was working for or the organization. And that's really what I like to do the most. I like to be a problem solver. I like to be a point of contact for others. And I like to make sure that we are working on and passing policies that have everybody at the table giving their perspective, and the best policies are ones that every voice is heard on. And so I've prided myself on being a convener and on being responsive. I think also just knowing that you all can call on me at any time, giving you all timely information. I know that was incredibly important to then Senator Madaleno at the school system, you know, what was happening in schools in his district, and knowing he had a point of contact that would quickly respond and get him the correct information. And then I also think another big bucket of this is understanding policies and how things fit together. Leaving the school system was a really difficult decision because I had such a passion for education policy. At the time, I was pursuing a graduate degree in public policy, focusing on education. And I was like, why would I want to go to a chamber? But I ended up going, and I'm so glad that I did, because I really started to understand how all of these policies fit together. You can't have a strong education system in Montgomery County without the economic development and taxes to pay for that school system. And then the opportunity to go to Care First was yet another opportunity to kind of understand how that fits together with economic development, with education. Not only health, but social determinants of health. How does housing impact an individual's ability to access education or to invest in communities? You know, those communities that have been historically disinvested in, how can we improve the lives of those individuals and target investment in those areas? And so I think having a passion for learning and policy, as you can see both in my career and also my academic background, I always have a thirst to learn more and to work to solve problems. And then finally, I think just an understanding of how this government functions, how different it is from Annapolis. I think the General Assembly is very envious of the power that this council holds, particularly as it relates to the budget, and what an impactful voice that all of you have as individuals, but also as a collective whole. And so understanding that. So overall, just being responsive, having a desire for policy, and understanding how Montgomery County operates.
Thank you. This role, as we have talked about, is a key conduit between the executive branch and the legislative branch, the county council. How do you intend to manage the competing priorities of both entities so that you can serve both and, most importantly, serve the broader public?
Thank you for the question. I think in every role I've had, there's been a policy or two that I necessarily haven't agreed on personally, but I've had to kind of deliver the message of delivering, you know, this is the intent of the principal, this is the intent of the company. And what I found in those situations, and in those where I agree with it, is you have to find out how all of the different stakeholders, what their intent in the policy is, and what is the outcome that we all want. You all are public servants, the county executive is a public servant. You all want what's best for the county, and there probably are going to occasionally be disagreements as to the vehicle as to how to do that, but as long as we keep that outcome in mind, I think that that's kind of the best frame of reference as you work on some of these more difficult issues. And it's the art of compromise. It's where can where can we give on certain things, what's really, really important to you in X bill. You know, if A and B are a top priority, that's what we have to make sure, but then maybe there's some wiggle room on C and D. And it's, at the end of the day, it's being respectful. I think that's why, actually I know that's why I stay in local and state government, is that relationships are still there at the end of the day. There might be occasionally some frustrations, but at the end of the day, you're friends, you have respect for one another, you know that the next day you have to wake up and be sitting right here again. And so there's a desire to make the best outcome while staying respectful and staying kind of working in a collaborative in spirit. So it's managing that. It's understanding what's important to all of you, what's important to your constituencies, how can we help those constituencies, how can we be responsive to all of you, and in addition, your staff. You all have exceptional staff here at the County Council, and so making sure I'm responsive to them as well as all of you.
We do have exceptional staff,
We do.
so thank you for acknowledging that. If appointed, how would you position this role to work on racial equity and social justice issues?
So I don't think this role, because I'm not driving policies forward, I think it's just having the importance of or knowing the importance of that office and the work that Ms. Ward is doing, and making sure in every policy that we approach, looking at it through that lens. I've had the opportunity, particularly in the school system and in Care First, to really understand this county in a way that I don't think a lot of people have the opportunity to. I think Montgomery County has this perception of everybody is wealthy and rich, and it's a great, incredible county with great, incredible resources, but not always do those resources hit all of our constituencies. And so obviously continuing to work close with Ms. Ward is incredibly important, and her office, but also just having that lens and making sure that when we're discussing policies that we're keeping in mind all of the constituencies that might be impacted by those policies.
Thank you. Are there any potential conflicts of interest of which we should be aware?
No.
No conflicts. Okay. Let me turn to Councilmember Lukey.
Thank you, Mr. President. First off, I just want to say I am so happy to see you here.
Likewise.
And I am always impressed by your tenacity and your determination, but also your ability to keep the eye on the humans involved in the process. That's hard, and I know you mentioned your ongoing thirst for knowledge, and hopefully everybody read your resume carefully, but to put it in perspective, it is incredibly difficult to go to law school while working full-time in a job that requires your ongoing attention during the state's legislative session. And you have done that with grace, and you have done that with persistence. And I know you will bring that to bear in this role that you're seeking now. And the skills necessary to do fundamental parts of this work could be learned, but you come by them naturally. And for that, I am appreciative, because I know it will benefit us as a body greatly, and it will benefit the county executive branch greatly to have that kind of collegiality back and forth to help make things go smoothly for all of our residents. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to speak to your awesomeness, if that's the best way to phrase it, and thank you for your interest and consideration for this position.
Thank you so much.
I'm guessing those are her favorite kind of questions in a hearing like
Yes.
this. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good to see you, Ms. Swanson. Appreciate everything that you have done to better Montgomery County in the various roles you've had, and also the state. And I know it is those skills that you're going to bring here to help make Montgomery County government work even better, right? And that is the goal, so that we work more efficiently and collaboratively, so that our residents get the best services, and we help meet all of their needs. With regard to needs, curious what you think the biggest challenges here in Montgomery County might be, aside from the council versus executive dynamics outside in respects to policy. What do you think that we should be doing better, or what issues do you think you'll be working on to help us do better?
Thank you for that question. I think that the council, I'm skeptical to say to do things better because you all do a great job on so many different issues. The first thing that comes to mind, just because it was a big topic during the legislative session, is affordable housing. As I was waiting to come out here, I was just talking to someone about who wants to buy a house in Montgomery County and is having trouble kind of affording that. And I know that this council did a lot of work many years ago with the Greater Washington Partnership and their goal in trying to get to that affordable housing. And there's the affordable housing on the lower end, but also kind of that middle housing too. And as seniors kind of want to retire and downgrade, not having the ability to do that because it doesn't make economical sense to do so, and then kind of having that, then the single family homes aren't being left so people can't move in. It's kind of like a perfect storm of different things. So I think affordable housing is a big one. What I saw during COVID is just and when I was working at Care First, is just an inability to access services, whether it's knowledge about those services, but also transportation. In my role at Care First, we actually diversified what we were testifying on, and more than just healthcare, I testified on a number of transportation bills, because you can have the most tremendous healthcare system in the state, but if no one can get there because they have to take a bus to then take the metro to then take another bus, and it takes someone 3 hours to get to a doctor's appointment, and they have, you know, other things to do. They have kids, they have a job they have to go to. It won't matter if they can't get there. And so I think transportation is another big one. But again, this council, I think, has done a tremendous job investing in transit, investing in roads, and looking at the dynamic between the two and making sure that there's a good balance, and that we're also incentivizing those that can take transit, should be taking transit, and getting people off of the roads. I think another one, obviously, is education. People come to Montgomery County because of the school system, and it's a massive, massive school system. I don't think people really fully understand how big the system is and how big our county is. And there's a perception that everyone going to Montgomery County public schools is going with the same opportunities and the same access to education. But another thing that was exacerbated during COVID is we sent all of the kids home, but some didn't have reliable Wi-Fi and accessing broadband and having the infrastructure to access broadband to then be able to go to school online. And so the dynamic between education and access and infrastructure is something else that I think we'll have to kind of continue to look into and deep dive into to make sure that that's something that's ongoing and it's continually happening. Those are the top three that come to mind, but there's so much more to talk about.
And those are the top three that people tend to think about with regard to what we need to do and can do here in county government. So I look forward to working with you on all of those issues and more. Absolutely. And welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Balcom.
Great. I'll just join the chorus. I think the last time you and I were in the same room, this very room, we were probably sitting right next to each other, right there at the table. So I'm thrilled. I think that you talked a little bit about responsiveness, and I think that that's really key. We all call Ken at any given moment, and given his portfolio, we'll continue to do that. So you have the county executive, all the department heads, 11 council members, central staff, chiefs, and shockingly, sometimes we don't always agree on a particular issue. Mm-hmm. So just talk a little bit about your experience in working through conflict with people that you work closely with and people who have to, as you said, at the end of the day, we have to come back and do it the same thing tomorrow. So just a little bit about how you manage those conflict and personality differences.
Thank you for the question. I think at the end of the day, it's finding out what makes somebody tick or what their various positions are on the policy, and then making sure that you have the right people in the room to have the ability to be flexible with the given policy. So if we bring, bill number 1 to you and you have concerns with certain parts of the bill, but you agree with maybe the outcome of it, having the flexibility and the creative thinking to figure out, well, what's a different way that we can do this? It doesn't necessarily have to be done in this specific vehicle in the exact way that it's drafted. And understanding that the way that we've presented it might not be the best way to do it. I've learned to never fall in love with a bill because often it gets amended and added, and sometimes it doesn't pass, and you try again in a future year when you have more time or different stakeholders. And so I think at the end of the day, it's understanding that everybody has an important perspective on it, and you and I might disagree fundamentally with X policy, but that doesn't mean that my respect for you and the office you hold, or respect for your staff and the positions that they have in answering to a constituency, aren't any less. And I think making sure that that stays at the forefront regularly, and frankly too, I think it also is helpful that we have a underlying friendship too. And I know that I know many of you. I'm looking forward to getting to know the rest of you at the level that I do with some of you. But I think having a friendship and a dialogue outside of kind of the policy space is helpful also, because then we can better understand why are you here? Why are you running for office? What are the passions that you have? And how can we kind of meld those together with ours? I had a very difficult bill this last session, and what ended up passing was one that nobody really liked, which meant that it was probably the right bill. Just because everyone kind of gave a little bit and we moved forward. And there were contentious debates and we went back and forth on a lot of issues, but the ability to kind of step out of it and not to fall in love with a bill and not to take opposition personally, and understand that everyone's speaking from a perspective that matters and trying to work through that.
Thank you. Councilmember Sales.
Thank you. And Ms. Swanson, good to see you again. I think I've seen you at all of the roles that you've transitioned to since you started at the State House. So it's good to see you here in this role. I think it lends well to all of the experience you've gained across your professional career. And so we recently found out that there were 25,000 fewer jobs throughout Montgomery County than in 2019. And it would be helpful for us to seek ways to jumpstart the economy. And we've already introduced a few pieces of legislation to do that. As Montgomery County is home, the anchor of the 3rd largest biotech hub in the United States, one of the leading innovative counties in the country, and giving your time and experience with the county's chamber, can you describe your plans to advocate for investments in the region's biotech corridor and any opportunities to attract jobs to the area?
So putting on my former chamber hat, what we regularly heard, thank you for the question, what we regularly heard from employers and from the county as economic development arm was the ability to attract and retain top talent. And so we really kind of looked at it through a lens of how can we get good employees here, which is why on March 13th, 2020, Councilmember Alvarez and Councilmember Navarro at the time introduced a small bill that would have provided an incentive for employers to give money to child care for their employees. From the perspective of we need to get good employees here, and what were employees concerned about? Child care was at the very top of it. And this was before COVID, and then during COVID, that need was just exacerbated. So I can't speak specifically yet to the kind of science sector and biotech sector. I look forward to learning about that a little bit more. But I think just viewing the lens through an employer of how to get quality employees here, it's understanding what makes employees want to live and want to work in a various area. And it's those things that I touched on in answering Councilmember Glass's question. It's affordable housing, making sure they can live here, making sure that if they want to take transit to work, that they have the ability to do that. And making sure that Montgomery County is also a really fun place to live, and investing in some of our, entertainment areas and, the restaurants and bars, and making sure that sector is incredibly important as well to invest in, to make sure it's also just a fun place to live. So I think I can look more into kind of that specific sector, but I think just making sure Montgomery County remains and continues to be and betters itself in being a place where employees want to live and work is probably a good initial approach.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I agree with what my colleagues have already said. The way this interview is going speaks volumes and is proof that you truly are the person for this job, Trish. You really are. And when you stop and think of the various personalities you've had to deal with, you had to deal with Rich Madaleno.
I did.
I mean,
did.
when you think of the various personalities that you've had to deal with over time and in various roles, that's exactly what you're going to have here. And I think, and I also didn't want to forget to very publicly thank Ken Hartman Spada for his job that he's done, and he's done a great job, and we're not using past tense because everybody still pesters him on a variety of issues, but you are very fortunate to have him following him. You're very fortunate to have him as a role model and as a mentor, and same with Rich as well. But candidly, I think you were the person for this job, and I look forward to voting for you. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
It's wonderful to see you, Ms. Swanson.
too.
So I was looking at your resume, and with the exception of your stops at the office of Senator Edward Casemeyer, Senator Assel, and
Astle, yeah.
and as an adjunct professor, I think our professional paths have crossed in every single one of the other posts you've had, literally. So you are very uniquely qualified for this post. I was excited when I heard that you were going to be nominated, and I want to join the chorus in thanking Ken for his tremendous, steadfast leadership. There were great improvements under Ken, and we had a lot of ground to make up, and I just think we are in a much better place than we were just a few years ago. So I guess my question is more for you, Mr. Madaleno. So we know Ms. Swanson's incredible reputation and work history, and the fact that she has built-in relationships with most of us is going to be a tremendous asset. There's always give and take in this particular position, and there will be differences on every issue, but will she be given the authority? Negotiate's not the right word, but as the liaison, will be in a unique position to be able to provide a bridge as we go through numerous deliberations on you name the issue. Will she be given that authority? And I know that depends on the issue, but just I'd love to hear from the executive branch's perspective how you envision that that authority being given to her.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Albornoz, for the question, and thank you all for your kind comments about Tricia. Certainly, myself and the county executive agree with that. Councilmember Katz's comment about she's the person for the job. I think it's very interesting that Councilmember Balcom began her questioning by saying, "Oh, I remember being at the table with you on a chamber issue." I think it speaks volumes to the idea of what the county executive and I have tried to do in building a team of people who bring in a diverse set of backgrounds and a diverse sets of points of view so that we can arrive at the best comments and the best policies and approach. Mr. Hartman Espada has been included in every one of our senior staff meetings. We have a variety of different groupings. He is part of all of them, and Ms. Swanson will be part of all of them so that she has an understanding of where we're coming from, why we are at a certain point or position, the opportunity to have complete access to the county executive and the whole team so that she can always provide you all with the best information, the most recent information, and certainly that is my goal for her to be brought into every meeting so that she understands and is empowered to be that voice as effectively as Ken has been the voice for the administration, and that will absolutely continue with Ms. Swanson.
Thank you, I appreciate that. The other just point that I'll make is, we have such a unique structure of government, and your experience having dealt, although it was a number of years ago, with the Board of Education, I think you have to dust off that old playbook, because there's an opportunity for us to more cohesively connect all of the corresponding county agencies. We do our best, depending on the issue, but I think you'll be uniquely positioned to help be that coordinator in some ways, because the county executive's voice is so important and probably carries more of the weight in terms of that coordination. So thank you. I look forward to voting for you.
So we definitely look for Ms. Swanson to have a role with coordinating, like with Assistant CAO Sonia Mora, with MCPS, because Ken had been doing an outstanding job working with the council. His portfolio had been growing, working with the municipal governments from his own days with the city of Rockville and the work he did in the Bethesda Chevy Chase area. He knew all the municipalities, so there are lots of opportunities for her to be connected with not only all of you, with the school system, with the municipal governments, working with the Office of Intergovernmental Relations. She has an outstanding long-time relationship with Melanie Wenger, for example, and so bringing all that together, I think will help advance all of our relationships, our work together, and truly satisfy her title, Director of, I'm pointing at the title, Director of Strategic Partnerships, so that, yes, I realize it was kind of confusing where I was going, but it's on the board for people who aren't, so that she will be able to develop those partnerships across the multiple pieces of our giant enterprise for the betterment of the community and our residents.
Thank you. Councilmember Fani Gonzalez.
Good morning. Your question from my colleague, Councilmember Albornoz, is a great segue, because I was going to say, and I'm about to say, that I met you when you were in the school system and I was in the planning board. And I think having you in this position, the first thing that crossed my mind when I saw your resume was that this is awesome, because we do need to strengthen that relationship with MCPS. And I think that's going to be very key for you. Among all the other duties that you're going to have, to me, that's just very critical. And so that's why I'm happy that you're in this position and you're applying. The other thing that I would like to say is I have been working with Mr. Ken Hartman for the past 6 months on this Wheaton Arts and Entertainment Advisory Board. It's a 501c3 nonprofit that we're finally creating in Wheaton to help us raise money to pay for the wonderful things that we need in Wheaton. As you see in Bethesda, for example, right? In Black Rock, in Germantown, and you have so many other communities in Montgomery County that have that going on. We don't have it. So, and I want to emphasize that to you, because your job is about racial equity as well. I know you mentioned Ms. Ward in her office, but this is your job too. If it had not been for Ken Hartman, who's sitting right there, I'm telling you, it would have been so difficult for me to pull this off. So don't forget that it's your job, making sure that everything that we do in Montgomery County, closing those gaps that we have across the county. Think about the awesome things that we're going to be seeing in Burtonsville, for example, in Wheaton, things that we want to see in Montgomery Village that are so far behind. You're going to have to take on that, thinking about racial equity. That's your job. So making sure that's absolutely clear here. And with that, I'm very happy that you're here again, and I look forward to voting for you. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other colleagues. Oh, Councilmember Joanna.
Thank you. Good to see you, Ms. Swanson. Thanks for being up for this position. I think you'll do great. As someone who went to law school at night and worked, I don't envy that. You got 2 years left or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a property final tonight that I have to get.
Well, yep. I knew this is that time of year. But people who have less time work harder and are efficient and prioritize. And in a job like this, you're going to need to do that, especially given the expanded role that Mr. Madaleno just talked about as far as with other government entities, including MCPS, and I chair the Education Committee, and I know your background. That will be important as well. I did want to put a bug in your ear for, I really appreciated the point Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez just made about the racial equity piece. In these roles that are kind of amorphous or part very relationship driven, I think that's sometimes where the racial equity can be the most important, or in that you're working on cross-cutting issues, making sure that voices are represented and it's embedded in the work, and I know you get that, so I really appreciate that point. I did want to ask, this may be a question for Mr. Madaleno or you, given the breadth of this role and the relationships, and it could almost be a never-ending role. You could always be partnering with somebody. Is there are you a person unto yourself? Is there other people that will be leveraged on the second floor or within county government to support the work of Ms. Swanson? So it's probably a question for you, Rich.
So, besides the fact that there is another full-time position that works with the Director of Strategic Partnerships, you probably see his name on much of the documentation that's flowing back and forth. Again, the position as it has evolved and been defined by Mr. Hartman Espada, it's been to be engaged in all aspects of the decision-making team. I mean, I have included him before he became an ACAO. He was part of the CAO team, so all of the regular meetings with the CAOs, all the regular meetings with the RSCs, so all of the regular meetings with the department heads. So as much as possible, she's going to be integrated into every aspect of the administration to make her the strongest, most informed voice possible in dealing with all of you and the other parts of the community.
Got it. So we got the one, yes, I have noticed those emails coming from, and really good to see Mr. Hartman Espada continue to be in his role. Look forward to working with you. I also have worked with you in many of those previous roles, and seen you bounce around in a good way, not in a bad way. You contributed in each of them. So thank you, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Okay, now I don't see any colleagues wishing to speak, so if nobody sneaks in here with a last-minute comment, thank you, Ms. Swanson, for your time. Thank you to CEO Madaleno and to the county executive for putting your candidacy forward, and we will be getting back to you very shortly on this decision. Our goal is to move quickly on this, and want to note your colleagues, your cheering section in the back over there as well. So thank you for that. Colleagues, this is a great first morning as we take up the budget. Really appreciate all of the work. We are going to be in recess now until 1:30. We will reconvene with a continuation of the review of the committee's work on the budgets.